Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our second session of CME Palooza. Bring up my slides here quick. So this is our Why Did My Grant Request Get Rejected session. This is sponsored by iMedx. Our moderator today is Angelo Carter, Associate Director of IME at Novo. As always, we have all of our sponsors to thank. So I'll go through those real quick. Our gold sponsors are Genentech and Platform Q Health Education. Silver sponsors are CTI Meeting Technology, Educational Measures, iMedx, MedPage Today, Education, Paradigm, and our bronze sponsors, ASIM, Clinical Care Options, CMEology, Forefront Collaborative, Global Academy for Medical Education, Highmark CE, PVI, Real CME, and Thistle Editorial, and also Vindico Medical Education. As always, there are three ways that you can ask questions if you would like. We have our MedPage Today text line, 267-6660-CME. It's a 0, not an O. You can also click on the bottom of your screen. There's a little thing, a Google plus Q&A link that you can click on. You need to have a Google account. I don't think you have to have a Google Plus account. I think if you just have a Google account, you can use that. And of course, you can always tweet your question to us using the CME Palooza hashtag. We do have our disclosure slide. Opinions, discussions, and/or conclusions expressed are our own. Do not represent endorsement by or position of our employer, its parent company, or affiliates. And I think that is it. So at this point, I am going to turn things over to Angelo to introduce the rest of our panel and to get things kicked off.
All right. Thank you, Derek. I'm honored today to moderate this session with such a talented panel of my peers, which combined has approximately 60 years of experience. I did calculate the years.
Wow.
In the pharmaceutical industry and commercial supporter side of the business. Joining today, we have Amanda Stein from Pfizer. We have Riaz Baximusa from Astellas and Michael Riley from Regeneron Pharmaceuticals. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
The topic today, why did my grant request get rejected, is probably the #1 question that MECs, hospitals, organizations, and others have when getting a declination letter. I'm sure a number of thoughts go through a grantee's mind. Where did I go wrong? What could I have done differently? Did I violate a company's policy? Was it my budget? Did I miss the mark on my outcomes? And many more. Today, you'll hear from a variety of different perspectives from a number of, from our panel to shed some light on issues and best practices. And so what we'll do is we'll kick it off with Amanda to give her insights and thoughts on process and policies. Amanda?
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Angelo, and good morning, everybody. I'm looking forward to speaking and answering some of your questions today. I'm going to start this policy and process section by just kind of reminding everyone that we work in a very highly regulated industry, and a lot of what we do requires many policies and processes to put in place to make sure that we don't do anything wrong. So at the end of the day, in the policy and process area, I think a lot of what we think when we're approving or denying a grant, underlying that is, can I explain or justify why I approved this grant to audit is a lot of what I like to think about in the policy process space. One thing that came up when we ran the survey to ask people if they had certain questions, and we started to think about different examples in the different buckets, I thought about in terms of process. There are some people tend to get denied due to submissions outside certain deadlines. So we, as a supporter, put deadlines in place for submission for a few reasons. I think the main reason is, if something is approved, the LOA needs to be in place before that start date, and that really goes to a policy aspect of it. But then there's also the process aspect of it, where we are really trying to manage budgets, we're trying to manage workload, and sometimes we need to put these windows or deadlines in place to make sure that we A, don't spend all of our money in January because we just go crazy and kind of approve everything, but B, just a way for us to kind of know when things are coming, be able to look at them, and then get them approved before that start date of the program. I think these deadlines and windows, they sometimes can be flexible, especially with technical difficulties with all of our wonderful websites, but also we have to be fair to others and try to keep these deadlines. Sometimes you will get denied if you aren't able to submit within these windows that we require or ask people to kind of submit under. Another thing that I was thinking was also outstanding reconciliation. So this can be reconciliations, this can be open payment reports, which is the new kind of thing that we're requiring everyone to report. At Pfizer, we kind of hold that requirement at the tax ID level. It's hard to defend that, oh, but that grant was given to this person, that organization, so this person should be able to get a grant even though the other one owes us a reconciliation. They don't want to hear that. It's really, we paid this grant to this tax ID, and that tax ID owes us a reconciliation, and that's the way it's seen, especially from our point of view. And we can't really continue to support new projects until the old projects are either closed or those payment reports are submitted. I think the open payment aspect of it brings it to another level because we are then reporting that out to CMS. So we need to be able to justify why we're continuing to support someone if they're not providing what we need for other projects that have been supported. Another thing that I wanted to bring up today was also a little bit of, and it doesn't happen as often these days as it used to, but confusion between kind of sponsorship and medical education grants. There's a very internally, there's a very strict definition between, I didn't get to finish my coffee yet, definition between what is a sponsorship and what is a medical education grant. Yeah, and as soon as those lines start to blur and a grant request appears to be giving us something of value in return for our grant, we have to deny it. We can't support something where we would get things in return for, and that may not be the same across my other panel members here, and they can speak to that, but there really is just a definite line between the two, and in terms of submitting a grant, we really just want to be looking at, providing educational grant support towards that part of the program. So I think in terms of best practices and talking across a few things I mentioned, the first is really, and I know all supporters have different deadlines and windows, but really just to be aware of those different deadlines. We like to get them posted, hopefully beginning of the year, even end of the current year, so you're ready for the following year. But they do remain pretty consistent, I believe, from year to year across all of us. So really just having a good idea of when things are due. And I would urge everyone to submit as soon as you have what you need to submit. So don't kind of wait for a specific timeline or window. Just get that grant in there if you have the information as it permits. And then obviously get all of those outstanding forms into us. I think sometimes a little bit of a lack of communication. So if there's a reason as to why you haven't been able to submit that form, especially if the reason is you're still working on compiling your outcomes, I think at the end of the day, I can speak for myself, we'd be happy to extend that due date if that's the real reason that you're having trouble getting that in. So I think just making us aware of why things are outstanding or why you're having issues and just getting that information submitted. And then another best practice is really just the applications should include, just be complete and include the detailed information, but not more than what is requested. So we do take the time to read everything that comes in, and from our point of view, we ask specific questions to get specific information. And I think if you just kind of stick to what we're looking for and don't try to inform us on things who give us too much information, you're probably would be your best bet. So those are my kind of high-level policy and processy points.
That was great, Amanda. I think also looking at best practices, what you said about deadlines, I think is definitely important to, if you have your submissions ready, get them in early. Don't sit back and hold on to those, as well as for the application, be complete, be as detailed as possible. One of the questions that came in from one of the blogs that we had here, and looking for your insight on this, in terms of importance for grant review, whether it's provider experience, learners, audience, needs assessment, educational design, there's a number of different things we can go on and on. Are there some sections that rank higher as far as importance when you're looking over at grant requests?
So I think, and that's a good question, I think the key is they're all evaluated. So everything you just mentioned, it does come into the picture when you're looking at a grant request. I think the important part is to make sure that they're all connected. So the project kind of is a full, it's all from, you know, beginning to end, it connects, because we see sometimes there's some disconnects between, you know, the needs assessment and then the design and even how you're going to carry out your different educational methods. I think also a nice thing to remember or think about is a little bit the more specific the better. So for, say, a needs assessment, the more specific you can get to your setting, the better kind of reviewer ranking, from my point of view, it would get. So for example, if you're submitting, and I'll just use vaccines because that's what I'm kind of the area I work in, if you had vaccination rates in terms of the need in your hospital, if that's what your setting was, rather than looking at, you know, the National Immunization Survey rates, that to us, you know, is more geared and more focused, and you really know what you're looking to do. So maybe looking at the outcomes, you kind of want to be able to demonstrate the impact. And I'm going to let Mike, he's going to go into the whole outcomes piece later, but I think that is a huge piece of what we look at when things come in. And then maybe for the, you know, education design, you're looking at the more specific, and as I mentioned, kind of how it all pieces together. So not just saying I'm going to do this and do this and do this, but why are you doing that and how it's all going to work together to get you to where you want to be.
Excellent. Another question that came in that relates to, I guess, process or application. The question was, many grantor portals have short required sections at the beginning of the proposal where you need to submit a summary of your agenda, needs assessment, but then they allow you to attach the full version later on. And the individual also says they've seen or they've actually put in see attached document in those required spaces. Is that okay, or is that frowned upon when you see that?
I'd say frowned upon. So ultimately, and you know, when we add those fields, even if we are requesting them on the back end in terms of required uploads, it's for reporting purposes. So we need to be able to, at any point in time, if we could run a quick report to see, you know, I'm looking to see what was approved in this area and get a high-level overview of, you know, X, so like the education objectives or something. That report will quickly allow us to do that. Just having a project title isn't going to get us there, and then seeing the C attached isn't going to get us there either, because it's not going to have really what we need. So I completely understand that it's frustrating to be able to have to type it in one place and then kind of upload it in another place, but there's a reason behind it, and at the end of the day, we really appreciate it if everyone would take the time to do that.
Yeah, I would have to agree with that. You know, when I'm sitting back looking at the variety of different stakeholders that we have internally, and you're looking across multiple grant requests that we've either approved and we're trying to summarize information quickly to be able to have access to, whether it's learning objectives or information, to be able to collate and to be able to share those, I would have to say and agree that those sections are important as well. Yeah. So I see another question came in, but that's more related to outcomes. We'll save that for Mike later on here.
Okay.
All right. So thank you, Amanda.
Thank you.
And I do have one more. I just didn't get a chance to type it in, so I'll give it verbal, and hopefully it's okay. You can always say no.
I'll just duck under the table.
Right, exactly. Where did Amanda go? if 95% of the support comes from a major supporter and a little bit from others, is that bad? That means, is that okay? Is that sort of disparity okay with you?
Yeah, I think it depends. I think it depends on the type of project. And just speaking from our kind of model, if it's really I'd say annual meeting or a kind of education where you're targeting a lot of people, or even just a one-off educational activity, yeah, I think we're always looking for multi-supported, and I wouldn't really consider that. I mean, while it is multi-supported, it is kind of still leveraged toward the 95% person. But then on the other hand, we do support projects fully, so I don't want to say it's completely a bad thing. So it's a little bit of it's an iffy question. It really depends on the project and kind of what's taking place. That's not really a great answer, but yeah, I don't know if anyone else wants to chime in.
Yeah, 2 points on that one. I think the important thing to look at is the therapeutic area. There are some therapeutic areas that are more orphan disease states, and they're smaller disease states where there might not be a lot of supporters for that topic or that educational therapeutic area. And so those are places that might be able to get away with that a little bit. With the 95%, it seems like a lot, but I'll give you the example that there are therapeutic areas where pharma, if we look at it, the majority of the larger funding comes from pharma, and the smaller funding comes from a lot of device companies. And so that's the one area where that scenario might have actually come true. That the device funding is the 5%. Or also, I've actually seen it that the society is coming up with some of the actual funding as well. So it really does. I know it depends, but those are two scenarios where I can see, either the device companies or societies are coming up with the additional 5%.
Good points. All right, as we go to the next section, I think one of the other big areas that organizations always have questions is budget, and Riaz is going to kick this session off for us.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of the topics that we wanted to just identify through here, when we're rejecting a grant, for budget, and it doesn't happen a lot actually. That's not the only reason that we're rejecting it. But I think what I wanted to really highlight here, a couple of the issues are that different requesters kind of lump together items to fit into a standardized budget templates. And I think if we look across the industry, this has been one of the big pieces of feedback every time we ask our annual survey of how can we improve. And it's even a topic at the annual alliance meetings and things like that. That the budget template, the different companies have different templates, and so how do we make our budgets kind of fit into your standardized template? And we do, we do take that into consideration, and we actually have tried to come up with some solutions as well. But then also, the second issue is that different supporters have different levels of categorization. So, one supporter might only want to know what is their funding being allocated towards. Another one wants to know the entire program budget. And it sometimes comes down to even some of the rules that companies may have put into place due to sunshine restrictions previously with food and beverage, that they can't support food and beverage or things like that. Some of the best practices that we've come up with is really provide a detailed uploaded budget. You can put it in Word or Excel in our system, at least, that gives further explanation. And if you take a look at it and just step back and say, does this make this line item is a single line item of $50,000 of a $200,000 program? You're probably going to have to explain a little bit around that as to what are some of the hourly rates or number of hours or unit costs and number of units that are comprising that larger line item. The other thing is that to look at if there's a unique fee like a symposium slot fee. That's important to really look at what's covered by that fee. Different societies, I think we've found, oftentimes have different levels of involvement in their individual independent satellite symposia, and so they may ask different questions or include different things that they're responsible for. And when you put in the whole budget and you put in this uploaded document of detailing out where are the roles and responsibilities, that's important, I think. And again, the other big best practice was to give further detailed explanation for the line items that are a significant portion.
Oh, that was good. One of the questions that came in, Riaz, and I'm pretty sure this varies from company to company when looking at how information is entered when it comes from a budget. Are there standard percentages for categories to total budget amounts that you follow, whether it's management fee should only be this percentage, honoraria can't be above this, lodging, different types of limits or key things that highlight when it comes from entering in a budget amount?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think, I can't necessarily give what is that percentage, because it really is difficult, and it depends on the request type. There's obviously more program management that's going to be involved with a live meeting than an online enduring. So, percentages are really difficult to ever say. But if I had to really kind of ballpark it, I think somewhere in the range of 15 to 20, 25% is probably where the management fee that I've seen on other proposals. And the one big thing to really be knowing is that we are comparing proposals across the board. And so if your peers are putting in something with a 15% management fee, and it looks, for the same amount of money, I'm going to give it that the total grant is both equal at $200,000. One had a 15% management fee, one had a 30% management fee, and there's other line items that you look at besides the management fee with content development, accreditation costs, and food and beverage, and everything else. It's a big picture. So it's not, to answer your question, it's not easy. But there are general, management fee just happens to be one of those that we can kind of ballpark a little bit. But it does vary between, usually I've seen it as low as 10% sometimes. I think that's probably the lowest I've seen.
Mike or Amanda, do you guys have any thoughts when it comes to, limits to certain sections or anything that you guys kind of go by?
No, I'd have to agree with everything Riaz said, and then just I think one other thing that we do have caps on is overhead. So we have a strict company-wide 28% policy that we can't, but that depends on projects and things like that, where that would come into play. But that's just one of the kind of straight line percentages that we have, and do publish that, so it's not a secret to anyone. Yeah.
Yeah, I have to agree as well. Budgets can be very problematic. I mean, our lawyers pore over the budgets very carefully, line by line, because we don't ever want to be criticized for spending more than this fair market value. So when you see a projector rental fee of $37,000, that's going to be one heck of a projector. So you just have to be realistic when you build the budgets. I mean, I did it for 5 years. I know they're incredibly painful to do. It's not fun. You have to hit the right margin, etc. But I think the days of multiple double-digit margins are gone. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on where you sit. So be realistic about it, be practical, and I think the budgets would be okay. There are definitely acceptable margins that organizations such as ours look at, and if it gets exceeded, then we just can't move forward with the grant.
Yeah. I think we're all in agreement with that. When when you're looking at some of these budget items and they come in bulk amounts and not really understanding what's in there. Same thing. Our compliance and legal really take a good look and really question like what's in that. What are those costs? So the advice I would have, and it seems like the panel would agree, is to really break that stuff out as much as possible and have at least some type of explanation of what's going into some of those costs.
Mm-hmm. I can also comment that we literally just wrapped up an internal audit looking at multiple grants and looking at budgets. And the internal pain that we all went through to try and track down and be refunded for anything over $100 overage was insane. So I'm not sure what everybody else's experience is, but our policy is any budget overage of unspent money over $100 has to be refunded to the organization. So having 4 or 5 people working to track down $137 was not a lot of fun.
Yeah, not at all. Not at all. Another question that came in, Riaz, when it came to the budget, the question was, if I'm asked if the grant money will help reduce registration costs for attendees, what is the correct answer? And I guess there gets confusion when it comes to registration fees offsetting the cost of the overall program. So any thoughts with registration fees and how that weighs in?
Yeah, so I think registration fees, at least in our system, we do ask what is your anticipated registration fees, income from registration fees, and we do look at that from a standpoint of if it's a $300,000 program, or I'm just making that number up, but a $300,000 program, and you're asking for grants for $300,000, and then you show me that you're going to anticipate registration fees of $250,000. The question that we have is that why are you asking for are the registration fees just profit? And that's kind of looked at differently, I think, from company to company, and I'd ask my peers to really comment on that one as well. But from our standpoint, we do look at registration income as helping offset the grants and offset the grants and also go towards supporting that program. The other thing, though, that brings up is really, I've seen this not a lot, but I can say a few times that they say that they're going to get 1,000 people there, and they want to say that because they think that that makes my program look great that I got 1,000 people there. And then you look at their registration, and it's all on the web. It's it's easily accessible by Google, and you can find the program, and if they've marketed the program, and if they haven't, then that brings up other questions. But if they've marketed the program and you see that it's average registration fee $50 a person, and you think that their registration income should be about $50,000. If you just do that math a little bit, and oftentimes there's not a correlation necessarily of the anticipated registration income and the cost of registration times their number of anticipated attendees. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, but somewhere close is probably where I would say. But that's another kind of a line item that we do scrutinize, and it's hard for me to explain it to someone. I think Mike said, we have to explain everything that we do, and be able to say, why did we approve it? If we thought that their registration income was going to be $100,000, why did we give them $300,000 for the whole program?
Okay.
Does that answer it?
We can't hear Angelo. Can you hear him?
I cannot.
Can you hear me now?
There we go.
Oh, okay, we actually hit the mute button. I'm just saying these are all valid points, and I think we're just scratching the surface on all these topics. When it comes to whether it's the policies or applications, budget, we can probably talk hours and hours. And I would invite people to send questions in to Derek, because I think this should probably be a future topic again, because I'm pretty sure there's a number of questions that people have on those. Our last type of big section is outcomes, and I'm pretty sure we can talk days and days and days about outcomes, and I'll send that over to Mike to start this session off.
Hey, good morning, everybody. So, outcomes. This is what makes strong men cry. I think that outcomes for me, this is kind of my passion. It has been for a long time. Because the CME industry has been so gray and fuzzy around it for such a long period of time that while we have guidance, we don't have guidance, and it's a very interpretive type of thing. So we at Regeneron have looked at the reports that we have gotten over time and the internal philosophy of the organization around what CME is and isn't, and the value that CME brings to the table. And we've made the decision that we really need to have objective outcomes. We can't live in a world where level 5 activities are generated by intent to treat analyses and subjective surveys. It just doesn't bring that much to the table, and when you stand up in front of senior management and try and defend a $500,000 program and then show that 1,000 physicians said that 60 days after the event, yeah, they learned something and yeah, they'll put it in practice, that doesn't fly very well in front of clinical studies that are showing true tangible outcomes. So we're working very much to make it practical, and we've instituted a policy internally where we will generally, and focus on the word generally, only approve activities that demonstrate level 3 and up objective measurement. So that's a pre-test and a post-test. And it helps us in the back end when we go to our senior management and say, we spent this much money in 2015, and here's what we can demonstrate in terms of the value of that money that was spent. So I kind of put that out there not to rile anybody up, but just to kind of draw a line in the sand and say, folks, we want your programs to be as successful as possible. And successful doesn't mean that we see a rise in scripts. That's not what our job is. Our job is to educate the healthcare professionals and make sure that the patients are having improved clinical outcomes whenever possible. So level 3 is where we like to start. Smaller grants, we will do level 2, etc. And by smaller, I mean very much smaller, because you can't expect a small state society to generate something like that. So just keep that in mind. I guess one of the real bugaboos when we talk outcomes, people always leap to advanced level stuff, 4 or 5 and up. I've gone old school though, quite frankly. And old school, one of the things that makes me foam at the mouth when I read some of these applications are their estimated learning audience is 10,000 or 20,000 people. We all know that that is unrealistic. And the way that that transpires out in a grant review is if you have a $10,000 program and you're going to educate 10,000 people, gee, that's $1 a head. Isn't that spectacular? And then the outcomes reports come back in, and they didn't educate 10,000, they educated 10. So it becomes a very serious financial issue when we start looking at some of these activities. And just a case in point, just a few weeks ago, we did an analysis looking at activities that we have funded over the past several years on a cost per head basis. And shocker of shockers, a few of them ended up in the plus $5,000 a head range. So that is very problematic because, frankly, it would be cheaper for me to take people on a vacation and talk to them on the beach than it would be for us to do these types of activities. So I know I'm being flip and I know I'm being very candid, but I want to come across to you guys to just really think this through. outcomes does not necessarily just translate to level 3, level 4, level 5, and up. It also is very basic in terms of numbers of folks that are educated. And we pay very close attention to that. Another really good practice to think through is you do all this great work and you educate however many folks you educate, and you're showing these fabulous returns. Help us to demonstrate that internally. I have one provider who loves to send me, literally without exaggeration, an interim report of 200 slides. That's great, but I literally do not have time to look at 200 slides from 70 different providers throughout the year. We're all very, very busy doing things, and I'm not saying that we're, above and beyond anybody else, but I want your work to shine. And so what I would ask, and this is kind of a best practice, if you're going to send me 200 slides, send me an executive summary in the front of 2 slides. This is where you were, this is how great it was, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What else can I talk about? So when I look at outcomes plan and instructional designs, I am always very sensitive to activities that are intuitive to the learner, will engage the learner in some way, and then demonstrate that they've actually learned something and then can apply it in practice. That means a lot to me. So what I guess some of us would call that level 4, some of us would call that potentially level 5. I call it level 4. And I like the pre-test, teach them something, post-test, and then at some point in the relatively near future after the post-test, can they apply that knowledge that they learned in a clinical case study of some kind? That's me. I mean, I'm not telling you that's what you have to do. I have done that before, and I find those programs to be very impactful and very successful in demonstration of learning. I think that's kind of a very top-note discussion on outcomes. I can't tell you what to do. I can only tell you make it intuitive, make it realistic, and how do you, if you're going to do all this work to write all this content in all of these developing clinical areas, then be able to demonstrate the value of what you bring to the table.
Yeah, I think these are all good points, Mike. I think some of the big things that I really like that you said is about the estimated audience. Be realistic. I really think it's important that the summary type of pieces of really being able to elevate the great work that's being done, and then also the question about when presenting to senior management, and I'm pretty sure there's a lot of mixed feelings about subjective and objective when it comes to level 5 type of information. And I agree that for some programs or for some of these higher level, it's always great to get those objective measures when being able to incorporate. But I guess for the rest of the panel, any thoughts of with the subjective type of information or ways or how you incorporate that information?
Yeah, I just want to interject because you reminded me of something before everybody else answers.
Okay.
I like the subjective surveys. I'm fine with them. Did you learn something? Yes. Will you institute in practice? Yes, that's great. But it has to be in addition to objective demonstration of knowledge increase, right? So I just don't want to use subjective surveys as an outcomes tool. So, sorry.
No, good points. Riaz, Amanda, any thoughts?
Sure. So I think just to echo what you said, I think there's a time and a place for each type of level depending on the area and the project. And I think the big piece that we look at is it needs to connect. So what you're looking to do and what you're saying you're going to end up with, there needs to be a connection. And I think a lot of times people jump to the public health outcome, and it's just not realistic. So, and then that triggers something in our minds when we're looking at it. So I think there's just got to be a connection.
Right. Well, the other quick takeaway is if someone's going to do a really advanced activity that shows clinical impact of this educational event, that's terrific. But we also have to be realistic that that's probably going to take quite some time to do. When we look at activities that are looking to demonstrate clinical impact, level 5, level 6, etc., you're probably looking at 2 years from the time the thing goes live until you actually have data that can come back post-analysis. So that's why the interim reports are so important, because we have to keep these activities top of mind. A lot of pharma people move around, and granted we have a unique space in IME that folks kind of come into IME and then stay for a while, and maybe we're all masochists, I'm not sure, but I've been doing this for 20 plus years, and I have no intention of leaving if I can, hopefully not. But a lot of other pharma people change jobs every 2 to 3 years, and if the program starts and then it takes 2 years to generate data, the folks that looked at it previously are gone. So you have to start from ground zero with whoever else is in the job now.
Yeah, and I also would probably agree, like if an organization is doing some of these higher level types of outcomes, instead of it just being that kind of one and done where that project ends, how do you share those best practices from the success of those programs, whether it be through publications or being able to share with other organizations to replicate? Because as we all know, funding for pharma is always cyclical. It goes up and down, and if pharma funding is not there, what's the sustainability of some of these types of programs? And so for these type of investments, I'm always looking for what is that plan. If another dollar doesn't go into this type of initiative, what are you doing to get other organizations, whether it's a ACO, an MCO, some of these other hospital organizations, to throw some skin in the game to really get these, keep these programs going if they're truly working and demonstrating a clinical benefit for the patient.
Sure.
One of the questions, Mike, that came in is the quality or presence of outcomes reporting from previous grants a big factor when you're sitting back evaluating proposals?
Most definitely. While we always request, if someone tells us that they're going to do a level 5 program, for instance, we always request some type of previous demonstration of that. And I can't tell you how many times the previous demonstration is a level 1 or level 2. And that's just, a lot of folks don't understand it. I'm not sure why at this point that doesn't occur, but previous demonstrations of outcomes is huge. If the instructional design shows that how they're going to do it makes sense and they have never done it before, that's fine. It's all about innovation and looking for opportunities to find a way to engage the audience. And if an organization has never done a level 4 or 5 activity, we're completely fine with that. You don't have to be, have 20 of them under your belt, but it does help. It's kind of like if you're going to have someone work on your house and you're going to have a new deck installed, and the guy that you want to hire has never installed a deck. How comfortable are you writing that big check to this person? So you have to look at it again from the the human nature perspective.
Good points. Another question that came in is, are supporters leaning towards supporting educational activities that are designed to change more than just competence? Is there a push for these higher level types of activities? And from a Moore's level educational format, what's most enticing?
So I won't call it a push. I think it's on a case-by-case basis. Obviously, depends upon the phase of the drug, depends upon the therapeutic area. Everything is different, and so each grant gets reviewed very carefully. Like I said, on a case-by-case basis. If it makes sense across the board, then by all means. We all know that there's this huge push for the quality improvement initiatives, and that's fabulous. But my main criticism of quality improvement has been I wouldn't say everyone, but the vast majority of the applications I have seen have been extremely expensive for a very small N of learners. And again, we're waiting 2 years before we see any real outcomes. So it's, we're all taking a risk doing that. So we have moved forward. We have funded several 5 and 6, level 5 and level 6 programs. In the conservative interpretation that we have of outcomes, and that's great. So now we're all crossing fingers that these very expensive programs actually demonstrate something, or I'm going to have some splaining to do.
Well, just to kind of, yeah, in terms of, I know we've been sporting a good amount of QI over the last 3 years, and they've really started to come back with those outcomes that are just amazing. And I think, to Angelo's point, a lot of what we look for in those proposals is how they're going to disseminate their results. So once they finish their project, it's not they're done and it doesn't go past their setting. It's really how are they going to get it out there for other people to implement the same successful project in their setting as well. So it's really, it is a larger amount of money, but we're seeing that the results are really on that higher end, and the possibility for it to go further than just where it was is even better in those projects. So.
And Amanda, for activities like that, are you looking for hopeful publication down the road? The results, great.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the only other thing I'll add to that whole thing is that, Mike, to your point, I with the quality improvement specifically, is that one of the things that we've seen is that, yeah, you're right, it is expensive for a very small N, especially when you're looking at a closed network system or things like that. However, that doesn't mean that you can't take that education that's being developed and just, even posting it on, I'm not going to advertise any sites specifically, but any websites that are out there to hit that target audience, in addition to that small initiative of the quality improvement, that's just another inexpensive add-on way to really boost up the number of participants very quickly, and so your cost per learner goes dramatically down. When you look at that, because quality improvement in and of itself is, I think it tends to be more expensive, but a lot of the cost comes into the chart. You're getting into EMRs and the systems, and you're paying for that kind of access and the data, and that's really a lot of the cost to it. So that's just my own one kind of best practice add-on, is that you can expand the reach of your audience, and it doesn't mean that when you say level 5, level 6 outcomes, it doesn't mean that level 5, level 6 for everybody necessarily. That if you're just posting it as a webcast, maybe you're going to reach a level 3B or level 4 if you did the follow-up survey on that one part of the initiative, and you're reaching level 5, level 6 outcomes on the live portion of it, and that's okay too, I think.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think that we agree with that approach clearly. If someone's going to take all the time to write that content should be distributable in other formats or other places beyond the closed system that they're looking to do. And I think the problem with QI has historically been, everybody thinks that EMRs are the golden bullet that will fix everything. And the issue has been EMRs don't talk to each other, so you have to write questions, etc., or limit it. That's why we have limited ends of learners. But even more to the point, we've done activities where the data that we're trying to generate for QI isn't in an EMR. It's hidden in the notes. So having an EMR doesn't help you. Somebody still has to do chart polls to read the notes on an individual patient basis. So again, yeah, we're absolutely behind QI. We think it's a great way to go. We're in the infancy of it, and I hope that we're going to see improvement in the programs that we have funded.
Yeah, I think these are all great discussions on QI outcomes. I think, Derek, you should probably note this down as another topic to sit back and chat about. I'm just going to shift topics real quick because we only have a little bit more time, and there's a repeat question that keeps coming in, and I would really like to get the panel's perspective. The question is, when we receive a response regarding a grant request declination, is there a way to learn more about why why that request was declined to improve proposals. And I know as we look at trying to be more transparent, and there's different legal and different compliance rationales from company to company, but does anybody use checklists or some type of scorecard or ways of how you communicate back so that organizations don't make the same type of mistakes and they can sit back and improve on a particular section? So if they had a weak needs assessment, is there a way to indicate that back to an organizations, or if their outcomes didn't match the overall type of proposal? You know, in your experiences, does your company, or is there a trend to become more transparent and provide that type of feedback?
So I can answer first, because I know it's going to vary by company, because it really, at the end of the day, a lot of it's driven by legal. I think from Pfizer's point of view, we will give feedback if it's requested. So a lot of the time we'll give a general, you know, denial bucket reason for a majority of our requests, and then if all the denial emails will include the statement that if you would like further information, please feel free to reach out to the either grant officer or senior manager. And then we are allowed to share as much as we can in terms of why your request compared to maybe another request was not approved. So that's just our stance on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have something like 22 or 23 pre-canned lines as to why a grant could have gotten rejected, and it ranges from, you know, everything. But I think the main takeaway topic is, for each therapeutic area, we have 5 or 6 educational objectives that grant applications should apply to on the content side of things. And more often than not, the applications will hit maybe one of them, but very rarely do they hit all 4 or 5. So if the grant's out of scope, or it doesn't, you know, generate the horsepower that the budget requires, then that's going to hurt the grant application as well.
And Mike, do you provide that direct feedback back to the requester, or?
Sure.
Okay.
We don't say specifically where they need to come in. Like, you didn't talk about this, and maybe.
Well, yeah, we're not trying to coach anybody to.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But we will absolutely be as candid as we can, and that comes from, you know, the folks in my department. Many of them have written these grant proposals and have slaved over them, so they understand that they're painful to do. And I didn't ever want to be the black hole. One of the organizations out there, one of the pharma organizations, is known as the black hole. You send your grant in and you never hear anything, and we don't want that. We want to be transparent and candid and help someone who put hours and hours into a grant app understand where they went wrong and what they can do to make it better next time.
Excellent.
So I'll add one. You know, from our standpoint, we don't. Our denial letter, and Amanda kind of alluded to this, I think, is that we're one of the companies that our denial letters are pretty generic, and they're the same denial letter that will come to everyone. That just basically says it may have been a lot of different reasons. And I think that comes from a challenge of legal compliance, as well as the challenge that it really is difficult to come up with unless you were to type it out every single one as to why exactly this one was rejected or not. Now, this happens. I'm going to put in a plug for Derek and I sit on a benchmarking working group, and we do the annual survey every year. And you know, one of the things that, and Mike, you and Amanda and Angela are welcome to join too, so we can have a big party here. But you know, one of the things that we ask is what percentage of people do give back detailed formatted responses, and it's definitely a minority of the companies that give that written response very detailed. But then you ask the follow-up question of, are you willing to give more additionally written or verbal by phone call comments? And that, I think it's something like 80 to 90% of the companies that say, yeah, we're willing to give that information back verbally or some in writing as well. They don't do verbally. So.
Riaz, I'm cutting you off now because we're up against our time limit, and Scott's going to cut us off in another 1 minute. So,
dead air.
exactly. So, Angela, if you want to wrap up, and then I have two slides I need to read real quick.
Yeah, I just quickly just want to thank our panel for providing their expertise on the various different topics. I'd like to thank everybody out there who was listening and participated in submitting their questions. And I would say still submit those questions in to Derek, and potentially we can have some type of follow-up to a session like that, because there are a number of questions for all of these different topics. And again, we can talk about so many different areas. So again, just thank you to the panel. And Derek, thank you for allowing us to be a part of CME Palooza.
Sure. No, thanks, guys. This was great. I feel like we could do an entire day on on this. So, just to wrap up, if you can take our survey, just so we get an idea of how many people are watching and your thoughts, it's right on the live page. It'll take you 60 seconds. And again, to view the very next session, which is going to be preparing for tomorrow's learners today. Just to refresh your browser, and I'm sure the video, it's probably up right now. Scott probably already cut us off. So anyway, thanks everyone, and I will talk to you all soon.
Thank you.